And I realized that so much of the decisions that I make are based on this primary question. It's a question that you ask yourself every single day, multiple times throughout the day. And when you figure out what that primary question is, you'll know, because you'll know that that's what it is.
You're listening to Investing for Good, a show that brings you the stories and strategies of people who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. And now, here are your hosts, Annie Dickerson and Julie Lamb.
Hello to all of our listeners out there. This is Annie Dickerson here with my co-host, Julie Lamb. Julie, how are you today?
I am doing fantastic. Super excited to be here today.
Oh, I am so excited. This is a special episode for all of our listeners out there. Today it's just me and Julie. We don't have a guest today, but we are hot off the heels of Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny as we are recording this. And I think I speak for both Julie and I when I say that we got so much out of this event that we just could not wait to share with all of you, all the things that we learned, all the things that we went into the event with, why we went to the event, and how it's completely changed our lives, even in just the couple days since the event has transpired. But I know it sounds like a lot. It sounds dramatic when I say our life has changed, but I feel like that's almost an understatement.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it certainly has. Definitely. It's funny because at the first UPW event that we ever went to, they say at the event that life will never be the same. And it certainly was not the same. I came home from that and learned a lot about me and, people around me and, what drives me, the life I wanted to live, the life I didn't want to live anymore, all of that stuff. But Date with Destiny was, really an event that showed me that UPW really was just skimming the surface of this big pool of, information out there that is not widely known and widely shared, and UPW was more like the introduction into that. And Date with Destiny was really like diving into the pool and getting the chance to swim in the waters and really see what is this world that we live in? What is it all about? And, who are we at the core? What drives us? What motivates us? What kind of people are we? So that you can start to understand how to work better with yourself first and foremost, not to mention, how can I work better with a business partner or how can I work better in a relationship? So
to all of our listeners who are new to this whole Tony Robbins world, so UPW is Unleash the Power Within. And Julie, you and I think it was in 2019 was the first time we went to UPW. And I remember we went, for our business. We really went when we were like, okay, we're going to learn more about how to drive our business, grow our business. And I think at that event, we learned so much more about ourselves and the relationships and connections that we have with people around us and all the other aspects of our lives. And we realized how much focus we'd been putting on our business and some of the other areas in our life that needed some of that focus and attention. And so then we decided to go again this year, but unfortunately with COVID, I think we were originally scheduled to go in March.
Yes.
Of 2020.
I think it was the day that the country shut down or that week, right? March 13th.
That week, because I remember Tony's team had sent out this email saying, no, we're not going to cancel the event. Events are like 15,000 people. And they're like, no, we're not going to cancel. We've never in 40 years canceled a single event. And then they sent another email. Actually, we're going to have to cancel. The governor said there's no events. And so over this time, they've always done these live events. And for any of our listeners who have been to these events, it's not an event. It's an experience. It's like lights and music and people jumping up and down, dancing. And it's otherworldly, really.
Well, it's like not even just a few people either. Not even a few hundred people, not even a few thousand people. You're talking 15,000 people in one room and dancing and chanting and saying all this stuff. It's kind of cult-like. It was kind of bizarre. Like, when you first go, you're like, "Ooh, I feel kind of uncomfortable." But it was, it's the feeling that you get when you're in the room with that many people, living this experience together is unlike anything that I've ever done before.
And so that's so they were doing these live events, and they were like, after several months, they were like, okay, we're going to do it virtually. And we were like, virtually? How can you possibly do that virtually and have the same experience? Because I remember being in that room of 15,000 people, and, we weren't near the front. We were like in the middle or towards the back. And Tony's like, he's 6 feet 7 inches tall, but you look at the stage and he's like a speck. Teeny tiny. Teeny tiny. It's like football fields away. But then you still, all the way back there, you have the big screens, you have the lights and the music, and you still feel that energy. And I remember when they said they were rolling out the virtual event, we were like, well, how can I possibly have that same experience in my home with all these distractions? But they did such an amazing job. It's so unprecedented, and it's created such an incredible virtual experience for people around the world.
Yeah. It was so, even more impactful for me doing it here in the freedom of, not like of my own home, to be able to express myself and experience it in the comfort of my own home, and having Tony in my home. Like, that's what it feels like. Right. And he spent, like, I forget, do you remember what he said? Like $12 million or $20 million building out this studio where they've been, this virtual studio, or not a real studio to hold the virtual events. But it's wild. He comes on screen, and behind him is this huge screen. Like, I don't know, it's maybe like 20 feet high, maybe 15 feet high, because it's like double him, and maybe like 40 feet wide, something like that. And he stands there and just looks at all the Zoom. It's all the little Zoom images. And there's like, 100 of them behind him. And then he has one in front of him too. So even his experience, like the way they've been able to, like, for him, recreate his experience in the studio of, like, virtually having everybody around him or whatever. And then they had the app where you, like, shake it to say, make your move, and yes, and like the cheering and the clapping and all of that. So it really did feel like we were there. And, just being able to see all the Zoom faces behind him, it did feel like, recreated that feeling of, like, being there with, like, a ton of people. So
it was the faces. I thought that was a huge distinguisher from from the live event, because at the live event, you see the backs of people's heads, right? And it's dark, and you kind of see movement and things, but sometimes somebody's head's blocking your view of the screen, and it's like, but then at home, like you said, you're in the comfort of your own home, you have a great view, and you see all these people's faces from around the world. People put up signs like love from Venezuela, love from Mexico, love from Peru, wherever. And you get this sense of all this love pouring out from all over the world, and all these people, these high achievers, right? A lot of them are entrepreneurs, very successful people, but coming to the table and having the same types of challenges, which was such a unique experience. We've shared some of the backstory around, like, why we go to these events and what we've gotten out of them. So let's get to the meat of it with Date with Destiny. So Julie, tell us some of your, we could go on for hours about this. I know. Start with some of your, like, your top takeaways, or the top things that you realized, or you learned, or you're taking away from the event.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I don't even know where to start, because it's like you said, there's just because just to give everyone an idea, right, of the scope of this event. Yes.
Yeah. Like, it's not a one-day event.
Like, no. First of all, it's not a one-day event, and it's not like you're in there for 5 hours a day. You are literally on this Zoom call with, I think there was like 5,000 people at Date with Destiny, with 5,000 other people from 7:30 Pacific time in the morning or so. Some days it was 6:30 in the morning till 11:30 at night, nonstop. nonstop. They'd have like little breaks here and there, but for the most part, it was rolling. Somebody's talking. Tony was there, I think, almost every single day. Maybe one day he wasn't there, but I think he was there for most of the days. But just to, give, so there's, when you think about the content and how much we took away, it was more than a seminar. And that's why we really feel like it was an experience. And there's just, so when we say like, oh my gosh, we don't even know where to start, was because, I mean, what is it like, 6, 70, 80 hours of intense like integration that we did. And it is wild. And so, I just to start, I mean, I think one of my biggest things was thinking, Tony talks about the primary question. And he talks about this idea that everybody has a primary question. I'm like, what? I remember when he first started talking about this, I'm like, I don't know what he's like. It's like some other thing. I'm like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. Right. And he started to explain what it was that in your life, and I encourage everyone out there who's listening to this to take some time to really think about what your primary question might be, because as he talked us through it, I realized what I figured it out, and you did as well. And I realized that so much of the decisions that I make are based on this primary question. It's a question that you ask yourself every single day, multiple times throughout the day. And when you figure out what that primary question is, you'll know, because you'll know that that's what it is. It's like everything you do, whether it's in your relationship at home, whether it's in the way you raise your kids, whether it's in your job and, how you approach the work world, whether it's in relationships with friends, that question guides everything. And so when I figured out my question, which was for me, how can I do more to be loved? There was like that component that tied into being loved. And it was like how I need to do more always to be loved. And that led me to a place of it never being enough. Nothing. It didn't matter what I did. And he told that amazing story about the king and the genie, and I want to go into it, but I want to share other things too. But when you get in that place where things are never enough to be loved too, it's not just things are never enough, but you throw yourself into a world of burnout, unfulfillment, all of these things. And that's why I came to the event, because I was experiencing some of those feelings. And so for me, that was so impactful, just to, one, figure out what my primary question was. And then two, to write a new primary question for myself. And he helps you structure that in the event. And, the new primary question should be one that presupposes something that you already have in your life, and that it really invites more of that. And so for me, my question was, how can I appreciate even more? This is my new primary question. How can I appreciate even more all of the love and the people that I already have in my life? So it presupposes that I already have love and I already have people in my life. And how can I just appreciate that even more? And when you move through your day with that new primary question behind you, in your relationships with your kids, your business partner, your, staff, your team, your, clients that you work with, it just changes your whole face almost, right? Like it's like you as at the core of who you are, it just becomes the thing that leads you and guides you. So for me, that was one of my big takeaways. But yeah, I don't know. What was one of your top takeaways?
No, I'm not ready to go there yet, because I want to dive in more on this. This, for all our listeners, this is such a core to what we do and why we do what we do, is that helping you to create that meaningful and intentional life by design. And in order to do that, you have to go through exercises like this to realize what you really want and what your goals are in life and how you're currently operating, and make that 2 millimeter shift to be able to change your destiny. And so Tony says that, this question, as Julie was saying, it's something you ask yourself many, many times, like over and over again, but it's subconscious. Yep. So unless you actually take the time to think about what it is, you don't know that you're asking this question. Yep. And so as he was going through this, I still remember he was telling everybody, like, his question was, how can I make this better? Which on the surface, it sounds like a good question, but then it's like, well, if you dig into it, that means things aren't good enough right now. Right. So it's like, he's always trying to fill it with more and more. And so he talked about his experience and then how he helped his family members and friends to find theirs. And I remember still he said, as he's going through this, I'm like, oh, what could mine be? And I'm like, I like to teach people. Maybe it's like, how can I impact people more? How can I teach people more? And then he's like, if you're thinking of a question that sounds good, that's not your primary question. He's like, your primary question is something that's raw and it's ugly. And, you have to dig deep. And when I did that, I found my primary question, which is ugly and it is raw. And for all these years, I've been operating with the primary question of how can I show that I'm better than everybody else in the room? And when I realized that, I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, it makes sense, right? Because I love teaching people, which presupposes that I have something of value to teach others. So I can show them that I'm better, right? And I was like, oh my goodness, that's where this is coming from. And like that moment, I was like, wow. Like when I think about how I operate in every situation, in every room that I'm in, and I'm like, I'm always subconsciously thinking about, okay, how can I be just a little bit better than whoever else is here? And I'm like, what? I've been cheating myself all these years because now I realize like, yes, that gives me some significance in that moment, but it's cheating me out of my authentic self, like who I am and what I really would have brought to that situation. And it's also cheating the other people out of like their greatness and what they bring to the table. So when we went through that exercise, I changed my primary question from how can I be better than everybody else to how can I more fully embrace the greatness that's already within me and within others in this moment. And you were absolutely spot on when you say that, just by that little change, changing that primary question to a new question that serves you better, it will change your entire life. And it's only been a few days since the event, but like already I'm like every moment I'm checking myself. I'm like, okay, am I asking the old question or am I asking the new question? And every moment I'm like, I already feel myself being more of who I truly am.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I feel like the event really makes you stand up and look at yourself in the mirror and deep in the mirror and no playing around, like, and in a way and in a setting and in a format, especially because it's at home, is so comfortable to do. And I think right now doing these, virtual events, it's a unique opportunity for anyone out there who might be considering. I definitely recommend doing UPW first, but doing it, there's one coming up in March. I don't know when we'll air this, but there's one coming up in March, early March of 2021. And, for the price point, I think it's like $300-400. It will change your life, even that. But it was, I mean, just so incredible. But, talking about, you brought up significance and that I realized that in so much of what I do, we did these spheres of influence, I think is what it was called, right? And he had 3 spheres, and one was your work, one was relationships, and one was self. And he had you draw a circle according to what your priority is. So, if work is your priority, that's going to be your biggest sphere. And then next to that, like relationships would be another one off to the side that might not be as big. And then self, it might be really small. That's how it was for me. My work sphere was huge, and my self one was a little bit bigger, and my relationship one was really teeny tiny. But within each of those spheres, he talks about what need are you trying to meet by devoting that much time to it. And I realized that for me, work was like my biggest. And I realized that my 2 top needs that I was trying to achieve by focusing so hard on work was significance first and certainty second. And when you lead with that need and you're always trying to fill that significance, you're never going to feel the feeling of fulfillment. And so and it goes back to my primary question. It was never enough. And I'm leading with something that doesn't fulfill me because at the end of the day, it's like, so, okay, I'm so important. Like, what else is there? You feel kind of empty inside, and then it's a cycle, right? Because then you just want to do more, and you just want to be certain, and you want to do more, and you want to be significant. And then I realized that now, for me, work is my new need is I want to have contribution and growth. And when you think about that and let that be the need that you're trying to satisfy through your work, how different it is, even in the relationships that, in our partnership and our relationship, and how I look at the business, our businesses that we have, and, how I approach it. How can I contribute more? How can we grow more? Not because I need to feel important and significance and the certainty and all of that. And so just these, again, like you said, little 2 millimeter shifts change everything in terms of your experience of the world that we live in. And so the spheres was another big one, big one for me,
It's funny you mention Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's come up a few different times in my life. The first time was in a textbook in college because I majored in psychology, and they teach in the personality classes and whatnot about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I had memorized it way back then, thinking like, oh, this is just like a textbook thing, like this is never going to, impact my life, or I don't even know how this applies to anything. And then fast forward to the last few years, and our business coach has brought it up again and again, this hierarchy of needs with us as business owners, as well as with our investors. And so for our listeners out there, so the hierarchy goes like this. So at the bottom, and you go in order. So you only move up as you get satiated with the lower levels. So you've got at the bottom, you've got certainty. So, right, think about like a baby needs certainty, needs that safety to know that they can get all of their needs met. The baby can't think about contribution because they have to know where their food is coming from. And so certainty is first. That's the basic level. So once you've gotten that certainty met, then that next need is variety. So once you've got all the certainty you need, you're like, darn, I'm bored. I need some variety in my life, the spice of life. And so you look for a little bit of uncertainty as you get that variety. And once you get that met, the next level is significance. So now you're looking to make a name for yourself or to, and then above connection, then you have the top two tiers, which are really the two needs of the human spirit, which are growth and contribution. Those are the highest needs. And that's where everybody is trying to get to. But the problem is that so many of us are caught up in these lower level needs because, for whatever reason, our past, our upbringing, our childhood, lots of experiences in our lives, that significance or that variety or that connection hasn't been fulfilled. And so all of our actions, all of our behaviors are to try to fill that hole in our lives, which is exactly what I realized too, was, I always, when I looked at this pyramid, I was like, oh, no, I'm like growth and contribution all the way. Like, I don't need any of that other stuff. But then through the event, it's like you said, with that mirror, you really are forced to look at yourself, your true self. And I saw, same as you did, that significance factor, which it's not terrible because it's brought us to where we are. It's really, it's pushed us to continue to drive the business, grow the business, and to reach that significance to get our name out there. So it's a good thing on the one hand. But also, if you let it get away from you, it can turn into a negative thing. So it's the value is in recognizing it so that you can fill that need for significance and move to those upper levels.
Yeah, it's so interesting thinking about, just being faced with looking at yourself. And Tony dives deep with other people on the call, and you get to watch that experience.
I loved those. It was like Oprah on speed. It was like amazing.
Well, and it's so funny because people are like, pick me. And then they're like all like, dancing and they're like, woo. And like literally like 2 minutes in, Tony, he's got them on their knees because he's like, now, if that was true, then you wouldn't want this. Isn't that true? And then all of a sudden you see their whole face change and you see the tears start streaming down, and you're sitting there in your home, tears start streaming down because you know that what he's saying is true. And he makes you look deep inside of you. There's no surface stuff. This is like the real raw questions. And you see people just like, oh man, it was, I must have emptied my trash at least like 3 times throughout the whole event. And I went through like tons of tissue boxes because I was just sitting here just like, oh my gosh. And it was I think especially right now was just such a good release of emotion for me because of everything that's been happening with COVID and, all of this stuff with investing and, where do we go from here? What does it look like? And kids at home. And so to go to this event and release emotionally in the way of crying and release joy too. It's not a lot of times. It's not like I'm sitting there like so sad. It was like tears of grace. Like he likes to say,
tears.
Grace tears. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I just sit there and cry and just let it all come out. And at the end of the event, yesterday, I guess was our first day without the event. I just was like on a high because I just felt renewed and I just, felt so good. And remember we were like, we don't want to leave. We're like, what time tomorrow?
We start tomorrow.
And so, and then that led us to, we're also doing life mastery and wealth mastery. And we've got business mastery coming up in March, the end of March as well. And so it's just, if this 6-day event changed our personal lives and bleeds into obviously our professional lives, I cannot even imagine what business mastery is going to be like. I mean, I can't even, I'm so excited for that, just so that we can dive deep into, the business side of it as well and take what we learned at Date with Destiny and really apply it to the business mastery piece as well. But I think, moving on to something else that was really amazing was the 5 elements and learning about what that was all about and learning about how everybody fits into one of these categories and they fit into one of the 5 elements. And as Tony was talking about them, the first one he started talking about was wood. And I think, what are the 5 elements? It's like wood.
Yes. So it's
fire,
wood, fire, earth,
water,
gold, metal, and water. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And so as he's describing wood and, because Tony's a wood. And as he's describing who wood is, I was just sitting there like, oh my gosh, like this is me. I am wood. I'm a wood. It made perfect sense. And then, we were slacking back and forth and I was like, what do you think you are? You're like, oh, I'm a fire, 100%. and when we realized that, it gave me insight into our relationship and our dynamic in the business because and he said this, and when he said these words, I knew immediately what, the power of the dynamic of our relationship. And he said that wood people need fire people in their lives to help them burn their wood. So if you're wood all the time, you're going to feel stressed and, and anxious, and you need the fire person in your life to help burn some of that. And so wood people are very driven. They're very, like see the goal, go after it. They don't really see anything else around them. And fire is more of like joyous and happy and lighthearted, really, kind of like fire. And that even alone gives us so much insight into our relationship and our partnership and how we work together in the business and what we each bring to the table, and really value that even more,
Yeah, I remember Tony talking about how, when you think about your kids, right? And you think, okay, well, like my 2 boys, they've grown up in the same household. Yes, a few years apart, but same household, same parents, same values, same bedtime, like all the things, right? But they are tremendously different people. And so Tony says, we all come into this world with a little bit of something different, in essence, a core that's a little bit different. And so that's where these 5 elements come from. They originally come from Chinese medicine. And again, they are wood, fire, earth, gold and metal, and water. Yeah. And so just a quick primer for our listeners. So wood, as Julie said, is they're driven, they're focused on progress. Fire is more playful, creative, joyous. Earth is all about celebrating everyone and that harmonious peace and making sure that everybody is getting along and everybody's, at their best and supported. And then gold and metal are the architects and the designers. They are very focused on the details. And then water is, as water in nature is, more slower moving, calmer, but they are the deep creative thinkers. They're like the novelists and the artists of the world who go away in their private world and they come back with something that's so thoughtful and so amazing and beautiful. And so it's really realizing what is at your core, but also realizing that there's parts of all 5 elements in all of us. And then using this framework to then look at your relationships and your interactions through this lens to see like, oh, that person's not attacking me, or they're not like, they're not trying to do something to harm me. They're just coming at it from their wood, or they're coming at it from their water. And so Tony talked about how his son, one of his 4 kids, has always been about chilling. Like he loves to chill. And Tony, for anybody who knows Tony Robbins, he's like the antithesis of chill. He's like on fire all the time, on stage, jumping up and down. He's wild and crazy. He's passionate. And he's 100% that wood. And his son was always this calmer, like, Dad, let's just chill. And he's like, what the heck is chill? I don't know how to chill. And he was always trying to push his son with his wood. He was trying to push his son to achieve more, to do more. And he said he realized one day that, his son just has a different essence, a different core, and that he's in his life to teach him, because every wood needs that water, needs the fire, needs the earth, needs the metal to tame some of that wood power. And so he realized that his son was there to really teach him this other part of himself. And so that's what I took away from that, is that step 1, figure out what you are. And then step 2, use that to look at the relationships in your life through a different lens, not as like trying to make everybody like you, but really appreciating everybody for what they bring to the table.
Oh, yes. And that even in and of itself has been such a game changer, because he says you have all of those things in you. You just need these other people in your life who are not like you to bring that part of you out. Right. And so like in our relationship, I need you in my life and that's what he says. He's like, oh, like Annie's my fire, right? Like she helps me bring the fire side out of me. And so the goal is to have all of those things, the 5 elements, be a little bit more balanced in your life. And you're always going to have one that's like more dominant, and that's okay, he says. But what you want to do is look around at the people in your life and be like, if your kid is more of a water, be like, oh, that's my water, and really accept them for that more of relaxing and the creative, instead of getting, for me as a wood, being like, what are you doing? Like, get up, like go do something, right? And like, that would be very frustrating. So even being able to look at it from this lens and see like, oh, that little girl, she's my water, and appreciating her for being the water, and vice versa, for her appreciating the wood in me. If I push her in school or I push her in her activities, knowing that, hey, it's just because that I care, but mostly because that's part of mama and who she is at her center. And so definitely something that I want to, teach my kids as they get older. And this kind of stuff is like the stuff I'm like, probably would have been great if I knew this like 35 years ago, right? Like, because my life experience, as will our experience from this day forward, be dramatically different, just because now it's we were talking about it before we started recording. It's almost like now we have a new pair of glasses or contact lenses on that it just changed everything, and it's just wild, because we have this new way that we see everything, and that has just changed our lives from this, the end of the event forward. So
remind me, is one of your kids a wood, or what are your kids?
No, I think my kids are. I think one of them is a fire, and I think one is kind of woodish.
Okay.
And then one is kind of waterish. Yeah.
Because he said that, most parents that have more than one child, they have like one child that is super easy. Like it's like they get along with, they understand. And then there's another child, or maybe other children, who are a little more challenging. But then when you look at it from this lens of the elements, you see why, is because most likely that child that you get along with, or that's easier in your perspective, is the one that's most like you and has that same core element.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember he brought that up with that one gentleman with his girlfriend and his 2 daughters, and he was going through a divorce and all of that. Oh my goodness, my heart just went out to him, because when you're in a situation like that, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how to get through it. And going to an event like this gives you the insight and the tools that you need to be able to view situations from a different lens so that you can give it a different meaning. And that's something that he talks about all the time. And that, and I knew this coach, our coach talks about this all the time. And I knew that, but he says that, he talks about this idea how, everything is just what happens to you. It's just what happens. But the moment that it becomes something is when you give it a meaning. And there's a story behind everything. And he told that one story about the dad who went into the store and held up a clerk with a gun and shot and killed, I think ended up shooting and killing the clerk in the store and ended up going to jail, right? And the gentleman had two sons, and the two sons ended up growing, same experience, right? Father held up a clerk at a 7-Eleven or whatever it was, shot and killed that person, went to jail. And one of the two brothers became really successful. And the other brother ended up doing the exact same thing that the father did. He ended up going to a store and shooting and killing somebody and ending up in jail. And it ended up that both of them said the same thing at the end, right? They said, how could I not have become this person? Look at what my father did, right? Meaning like one of them looked at what his father did and gave it the meaning like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that. That's not who I am. I would never want to do that. I'm going to be better. I'm going to do more. I'm going to be better. And the other guy looked at it and said, how could I not do this? Like, I am just like my father. And what other choice? He's the one who showed me the way. What other choice did I have? Like, this is all I knew, And so that story was so impactful for me because it really like nailed in for me this idea that, when you have a life experience, it's always about the meaning that you attach to it that gives you then the emotion that you feel about the event that happened. And if you can start to think about positive meanings for the things that happen to you, suddenly your emotions are positive emotions and your whole life changes. And so it was even like something as small as that, like throughout the whole event, like I said, like 15 hours a day, he's talking about dropping these little like nuggets and these little stories. And it's just like, just like mind blowing, Yeah.
I know. Well, speaking of the meaning, another really impactful moment or evening of the event for me was the suicide night, which was focused on these interventions with people who had tried to commit suicide and then had come to this event. Yeah. Went through this intervention. And I remember the story of these two brothers. Mm-hmm. And this was a recording from a previous live event, but Tony talked to this one of the brothers who had recently tried to commit suicide, but fortunately failed. His brother brought him to the event. They had grown up in the same household, had endured abuse and trauma and all of this stuff, and they had two very different outcomes. And his brother, he said, he would spend every extra moment at the bookstore. They couldn't afford the money to buy all these books, but he was in the bookstore reading Tony Robbins books and getting that mindset and the values and the beliefs and the meaning, assigning the meaning to it that he needed to get out of that place. And the brother who had tried to commit suicide, he assigned a different meaning to it. And he was like, oh my gosh, how can I pick myself up out of this situation? I've gone through so much. And then it led him to not want to be here anymore. And then what was even more powerful was not just the intervention, but the following day, I guess, in the event and in the recording as well, where we dove into the behind the scenes, like what's going on in the head of that person with the values and the rules. And so this was a huge eye opener for me.
Oh, yeah.
Because, people talk about values all the time. We have values in our business. We have values in our personal life. And so most of the time people stop there, right? It's like, what are your values? What are your top 5 values? Like family and love and joy and success, right? But then I think what the kicker for me was when he said, okay, well, the values, but then let's dive deeper into the rules. And so this was the real eye opener because they took this guy, I wish I could remember his name.
Yeah.
But this,
I don't remember.
the guy who had tried to commit suicide, and they looked at his values, and his values at face value were okay. They're fine, normal looking values. But when you look at the rules, and they had two different categories of values, right? So the towards values, the positive ones that you're trying to go towards, things like love and success and joy and freedom. And then the away from values, things like regret and humiliation and shame. And so when you look at those, but then you look at the rules. So then this was crazy because I forget what his towards values were, but his rules behind them were so impossible. It was like, okay, to feel joy, I have to have all these things line up in my life in order to feel an ounce of joy. And then the away from values, it was like, well, all I have to do is think about my past, which I do every day, to feel this incredible burden of shame or regret. And so he was living in that space all the time. It was so easy for him to feel those negative values and so hard for him to feel the joy and the love.
Yes. Yeah. It was so, that was another huge one for me because I was like, oh my goodness, like this is why when you look at the rules, this is why whatever your rule is. And you might be thinking, what are these ladies talking about? But everybody has a rule. And so that's why going to this event will help you uncover what your rule is. And so part of the event is changing those rules. And so I think it was like on, what was it? Transformation Day. I think it was like the 5th day.
Yeah.
We went in and we took our away values and our toward values and we reinvented ourselves and said, okay, we're going to make a new rule to make it really easy to feel the towards values. So things like joy and love and faith and compassion, and really hard. So we're going to flip flop them, and really hard to feel angry. Like, what is the new rule? The new rule has to be like, well, literally like my life has to be threatened in order for me to feel angry. Wow. Like if that was your new rule that guided your life, how amazingly different. If you're a person who gets angry at the like drop of a hat, imagine how different your life would be if that was your new rule for getting angry. Or on the flip side, like being joyful. Finding things like for me, like I've said, well, anytime I even, look at my kids, I'm going to feel tremendous joy, like abundant joy, like overflowing with joy inside of me. Wow, like how different. Not like, oh my gosh, my kids they have to eat all the right foods, finish their lunch, go to school, be a good kid, not whine, not do this for me to feel joy, right? Like that's how it is, right? Yep. And it's like, no, all they need to do is just glance in my direction or just be present with me, and I will feel that tremendous joy. Like even that has been so different for me in my interaction with my children and my husband, because, when I'm guiding with that, it just changes everything, And so, the towards and away values were so insightful.
It was so interesting too to see different people's towards and away values and how there were some conflicts in there, right? Like if somebody had success as one of their values, but they also had certainty as one of their values, well, that's conflicting because you can't, for success, you have to take risks and you have to try new things, and you're not always going to succeed. And then, so you're going to try to satisfy that certainty and being safe. And so that's going to limit you. So really seeing it from all 360 degrees and how the different values interact with each other. It was, he says it's practical psychology. This was the psychology I always wanted to learn when I was in college. I majored in psychology because I wanted to learn this stuff, not the textbook stuff. Yeah. And it was so life-changing.
Have you been thinking about investing in real estate, but aren't sure you have the time or the desire to manage the investment? Perhaps you're afraid, like we were, that you'll make the mistake of choosing the wrong market or the wrong team and lose your entire investment. Well, that's exactly why we created the Goodegg Investor Club. We do the work of identifying solid real estate investment opportunities in the best markets around the country, and then partner with you to acquire these investments, and then we'll all share in the returns. We'll identify the growing markets, strong, experienced teams, and the solid deals. We do all the heavy lifting of managing the tenants and the renovations, and as a passive partner, you get to enjoy all the benefits of investing in real estate, monthly cash flow, long-term appreciation, and the ongoing tax benefits. When we first discovered passive investing through real estate syndications, we realized it fit perfectly into our busy lives. We could put our money to work for our families, work less, and get more time back in our days so that we could focus on what matters most and discover our true passion and purpose in life. We've now helped hundreds of people invest passively in real estate syndications and are seeing the positive impact it's had on their lives. We invite you to partner with us by joining the Goodegg Investor Club today so you can start putting your money to work for you and get more time back in your day. Because we know that when people have more time in their days, they can do the true work they were intended to do, and the world will be a better place. To sign up for the Goodegg Investor Club, go to goodegginvestments.com/invest and we'll take it from there. That's goodegginvestments.com/invest.
It was funny. One other thing that I was just thinking about that we talked at length about was the 8 levels of consciousness, and how, we all operate in these different levels of consciousness. And I forget what the exact order was, but it's like beige and red, going up from the bottom, beige and then red and, purple and blue and orange and yellow and then green at the top. You probably remember better than me and probably can explain it better.
I'll try.
But what were each of those? Like beige was like...
We'll do it together. So beige is like, it's like all the basic stuff. Like you just focused on yourself, focused on the ego, focused on like just fulfilling basic needs. And then above that is red, which is the power God phase. It's like, you're like, okay, well, a lot of like celebrities and rock stars are examples of this, right? Where they're like, I'm the center of the universe. Everybody shall do as I say. And there's no question, right? My way is the only way. And then one step above that is purple, which is believing that I think a part of it is believing that there are many gods. And so there's like, this is almost like the tribal nature. So you're evolving to the tribal level of consciousness where like, think about like doing the rain dance to satisfy the rain god and the sun dance to get the sun to shine, the crops to grow, so it's that tribal level of awareness. Mm-hmm. And then above that is the next level of consciousness, which is blue, where now you have the one God that you're serving, but it's all about the rules. How do you satisfy the rules of this one almighty being? And so it's a lot about following this structure and having that structure in your life.
Yeah. I just want to say though, too, as we're talking about this, that each level of consciousness, so, starting with beige, has a primary driving need. Yes, and it's so interesting to relate the primary need to why you're operating out of that level of consciousness. And so for beige, it's certainty. And so for the tribal order, it's also certainty. And then the power God, rock stars and the ego and all of this, it's significance and certainty, right? Like totally makes sense. And then the rule one, the blue, it's also significance and certainty. And so, like having these insights and knowing what's driving that mode of operation essentially, and your level of where you want to operate is such an important part of that as well. But yeah.
So do you have it up? So what, did we get it right?
I do.
It's beige. Mm-hmm. What was next?
Beige, survival instinct, instinct driven. And then it's tribal order purple. That's level 2.
Purple is next. Okay.
Purple is next. Yep.
Beige, purple.
And beige, purple. And then level 3 is the power God, red. Significance and certainty are the driving needs. And then level 4 is the order and the absolute is what it's called. And just like you said, it's all about rules and, very rigid rules too, structure, consequence, like it's, and so when you think about, okay, where am I operating out of? It's so wild to assess like where do you fall, and everyone has a primary or a default sort of level of consciousness, but yeah, not the blue one was driving need was significance and certainty. Above that one is level 5, which is the orange, which is this is me, striver, driver / achiever, and it's this people at this level are driven for success and strategy, materialism, totally consumerism, image, status, growth, a belief in rational thought that drives everything. Oh my gosh, I am such, in our business, I'm so like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like if we do this and we do this, then it must equal that, right? And so for me, I kind of flow, I think, between orange and blue a lot, where I really go to like the rules, and I think that comes from like my legal background, and I need structure because I need certainty. And the primary need driver for Striver Driver level 5 is significant certainty and growth. And that is me in a nutshell. And it, just like Annie, you were saying, it's not bad to have that significance. It's just that when you lead your life with that as your primary need, you live a different life. And when versus having growth be at the top or connection be at the top of why you're trying to connect. If anyone out there has ever felt unfulfilled or felt like you're doing something and you don't know why you're still not happy, go to this event. I promise you, it will just give you so much more insight into all of this. So, and then after 5 is 6, which is the socially conscious. So it's kind of like, Greenpeace and, very happy, and, people who want to explore their inner selves, and, they're all about human spirit and values and community. And that primary driving need is connection and contribution, which again, like when you think about, if you led with that connection being your primary need, how much more fulfilling your life would be than thinking just about me and significance, And then the level 7 is integrated flex and flow. And it's, the drive at this level is ecological, application of natural systems. People want to, I forget exactly, what did he say?
And that's the yellow level, right?
The yellow one. Yeah, what did he say about that one?
That's like the yellow and the turquoise, which is the last one. Those are the higher level, the spirit centric
ones,
right?
What it was. Yes.
Because the green is the world centric, the yellow and turquoise are spirit centric. Yep. And the yellow is really about flexing between all of these other ones. And, he gave the example of, he has read that anger power God in him, but he uses it with purpose. He doesn't default to it when he's stressed, but he knows when to use it. It's like a Swiss Army knife. And that's the difference for yellow, is they know what all these are. They have all of them within them, but they have that control to be able to flex between them on purpose, not when they're stressed.
Right. Yeah. And then, you mentioned, and then the driving primary need for the higher levels of spirit centric is connection and contribution. So it's like, again, like when you are able to recognize when you're falling into red or you're being a total orange, that maybe you want to pull that side of you out and operate from a different level of consciousness that will allow you to feel that connection and that feeling of contribution that will give you that sense of fulfillment that may have been missing from your life. And so 8 levels was so funny. And what did you feel like you were on that, like where you operate out of mostly?
I think I'm mostly green, but I remember that one.
Gosh, that woman, the Verity, and what was her, Joey? Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, that was great. But also the recording of the live event that they had, where they actually had people in the audience wear these different colored hats to represent the different levels of consciousness.
Yes.
And so you get to hear them talk as if they embody that level of consciousness, which was really so funny because the green lady, she had the green hat on, and she was like, I just love everybody. I just want everybody to get along. And then the orange guy, the guy with the orange hat, the focused on like business and science and data. And he was like, well, you're against all the, the bulldozing and, all the progress, but look who built all the roads and made the clothes that you're wearing. And it was so funny to see it like come to life, not just like this chart on paper, but to see it come to life. And then I remember hearing the green lady, and I was like, oh, I agree with so much of what she says. But then the downside of green is that green doesn't make a lot of progress because they want everybody to be equal. Yep. And it's very egalitarian. And so it's like, everybody come join in for a circle. Let's listen to what everybody has to say. And the orange is like, no, like we got to make a decision. We got to move forward. We got customers to satisfy. We got ROI to worry about. Like all these things. It's just so funny.
Yeah. And it was so funny because when we were talking back and forth behind the scenes as this event is going on. And so Annie and I realized that she's the green and I'm the orange. And we just realized in that moment, in our conversations oftentimes about the business, how we're missing each other like completely. We're just like, woof, because you're a green and I'm an orange. And so it was just so, interesting to see. And, what we've learned is that we all need to be able to kind of flex and, like Annie said, be able to use these different levels of consciousness on purpose, not by default. And it's when you fall into the red level and you do it by default, because that's where you normally go when you get stressed and angry. But really thinking back, okay, how am I operating and what would be the best? Maybe I need to pull some yellow into this, or maybe I need to pull some green right now, or maybe you do need to do some blue. Maybe there do need to be some rules around, what we're doing and how we're doing it. So it's just, again, like,
tell everyone, did we touch on the turquoise? Tell everyone what the turquoise one was.
Turquoise says an awakened soul, primary driving need being connection and contribution, which is the same for the flex and flow, the yellow, and the same for green as well, connection, contribution. But it says that the focus at this level is on holistic, collective individualism, cosmic spirituality, and earth changes. People at this level feel constant energy and a connection to not only all people, but all things. And they are sensitive to harmonics and mystical forces and unite feelings with knowledge. And it was so funny because he gave that story about Sage, his wife, Tony Robbins' wife, and that funny story about how she was like, wait, do you hear that? There's somebody's hurt. And Tony's like, what? And this was like, they were like 6 months into their dating. And she walks like around the corner, around the block, makes a right turn, a left turn, and goes down an alley and kneels down and sees a dead bee, or a bee that was like on the brink of dying. And she's like, it's this is the thing. And that's how he drove home, turquoise and this, this other level of being connected to the world and connected to other things. Now, I don't know that I'll ever get to turquoise. I think it would be really amazing if I could, but that sound, me being such an orange, where logic and rational thinking, there's no way that falls into that. But it's just so cool because maybe there are times in my life when I do need to bring out some turquoise. And a lot of that was something that I've realized, particularly in this year, but just coming from this event that I walked away with is that I need to have more faith. And faith in myself, faith in my business, faith in my kids' ability to do certain things. And I just need to have more faith. And I think that, if I can operate out of that, that might be my way to get a little bit closer to turquoise, where I'm feeling like, having faith that this world is more than just about like what's happening here, and feel that sense of connectedness, which I think is the thing that was missing, that where I was feeling that sense of unfulfillment, and so much, we get to do so many fun things and we get to impact so many lives, but yet I was still feeling that sense of like unfulfillment. And so
amen, sister. We all need a little turquoise in our lives.
Yeah. And I think, one last thing before we wrap it up here, that we had talked about, we did this old Hawaiian chant. And I don't know, most people probably don't know this about me, but I'm originally from Hawaii, was born there and then lived there till I was probably 6 or 7, but go back all the time. It is home for me. And so it's the word is, so he calls it, what does he call it?
Ho'oponopono.
Ho'oponopono is what he calls it, but really it's ho'oponopono is really like the way you spell it out and the way that you say it. But, and he talks about this, it's a spiritual guided meditation, and it's really simple. And we did it together with 4,000 other people on Zoom with our eyes closed. And it was such, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a release almost,
like cleansing.
A cleansing. Yeah. Just, you let go of so much, and you forgive, and you gratitude and all of that. And he talked about how, you're 100% responsible for your own experience, and how doing this like meditative chant will help you, be able to, I guess, take the lead and really have an amazing experience. And so the thing is, it goes like this, and it's 4 things. And I encourage anyone who's listening to take a moment and close your eyes and get in a place where it's quiet. Don't do it where you're with your kids and things are crazy, but at the end of the night, maybe sit there and say it out loud, because it was so impactful to say it out loud and really, get into it. But
let's do it right now. Should we do it right now?
Let's
All of our listeners, close your eyes, unless you're driving, pull off the road, close your eyes and enjoy.
Yeah. And so it's just 4 things that we'll say over and over and over and over for, I guess, a minute or so. And you sit there and do it. So it goes like this. I'm sorry. I love you. Please forgive me. Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you. Please forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I love you. Please forgive me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I love you. Please forgive
me.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I love you.
Please forgive me.
Thank you.
Yeah. And when you take the time to really let that settle in and say it with truth, like when you say, I'm sorry, really feel the feeling of being sorry. When you say, I love you, don't just say like, yeah, I love you, but really like imagine somebody in front of you that you absolutely adore, somebody that you absolutely love. And you say that and you say, I love you. And you say, please forgive me for anything wrong. Who knows, whatever it is, the small things, the big things. And when you say, thank you, and you end with that feeling of gratitude, oh my goodness, this meditative prayer in and of itself, again, one small thing has just transformed me and, the way that I look at my life. Oh, so healing. That was the word I was looking for, was healing. Is it heals all of the frustrations and the things that get to us sometimes in our life and frees you. It heals you, and then you feel free. And that, at the end of the day, was one of the biggest things that I took away, was how learning about all of these things was so freeing for me. And it really just helped me to let go of so much so that I can live a better and more impactful life. And, I just wanted to end with saying that, part of the reason we wanted to talk about this is because it's not only the investing, right? It's not only about like get to where you're trying to go, buy all the houses, buy the apartments, do the investing and all of that. But it's the other side of it, which is you want to make sure that whenever you get to your goal or whatever it is, that you feel along the way fulfilled. And that when you get to that goal, you continue to feel fulfilled, because life isn't about, where you go, right? Life is about, like he says, the person that you become along the way. And so I think that it's such an important thing for everyone out there to think about, that it's not just about the rental properties. It's not just about building wealth. It's about more than that in the spiritual level and really finding that sense of fulfillment.
Well, for all of our listeners out there, if you want more of this, we invite you to join us. We're going to be going to like all of the Tony Robbins events from here on out, but we will definitely be at UPW Unleash the Power Within virtually in March of 2021. We are not affiliated with them at all. We just love the experience and would love for any of you to join us as well. So if you are going to join, if you have already signed up for the event, please reach out. Let us know. We'd love to connect with you before and after the event as well. And for any of our listeners who are looking for ways to get started with investing, be sure, in addition to this event, be sure to grab a copy of our book. We talk about some of these life and spiritual and living a life by design, these principles in the book, as well as investing principles. The book is called Investing for Good, just like this podcast. So it's easy to remember. Just text the word book to 41404 to get all the details on how you can get your free copy. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that this recap episode of our experience with Date with Destiny has helped you to change your life just a little bit.
You've been listening to Investing for Good, the #1 podcast for people like you who are investing to build a legacy for their families, create a meaningful and intentional life by design, and impact the world around them. For more resources, check out goodegginvestments.com/podcast. And be sure to join the Investing for Good Facebook community. And don't forget to subscribe and give us a 5-star review so we can continue to bring you amazing new conversations every week. Until next time, keep investing for good.